They want to take their ideology, their doctrines, and force it by control on the American people. They have this thing called the Seven Mountain Mandate. They made mountains like education, religion, media, arts, entertainment, and they want to take them over. And they're going to try to take over the country through what I would call it's an old theology called dominionist theology. It goes back to our founding as a nation. Back before we were a nation, it was the doctrine of discovery. Papal bulls told white Europeans they could take this land and displace all the people who lived here, and then take kidnapped Africans and make them chattel property. This was not new, it goes way back. So that's what we see with the fighting to the Venezuela. Then there's the servers. You know, we churches were good at taking care of the victims, right? Pulling people out of the river and not going upstream to see what or who is throwing them in. We love charity because my colleague here will write is going to say, God of the Bible is not about charity, but it's about justice. Okay? But we're the conscience of the state. We're not a tool of the state. We're a moral guide and a critic to raise up the moral issues. Now, religion has no monopoly on morality. In my Jerusalem classes, I've got students of all faiths and no faith at all. But the moral conscience is really what the nation is looking for. So not the master, not the servant, but the conscience of the state.
Awesome, thank you, sir. Pastor Davis, in a world where policies affect communities, how do we transform from passive observers to active social and economic justice participants?
Let me also say thank you for the privilege to be here today, and good always to be with Reverend Dr. Cindy Thurston. I am today concerned that the church does not mirror the incarnation. That is to say that Christians believe that God became flesh in Jesus the Christ. John 14, the Word became flesh. There is a materialization, so to speak, of the invisible and eternal Word. The church's work in America has to be to put skin on the gospel, to make palatable, touchable, and tangible the spiritual truths that we espouse. To the point of your question, therefore, in America, economics and the health of the flourishing of people must be done, therefore, in my opinion, out of the gospel. Because the gospel is the only message that can cure a diagnosis. It is the only message that can liberate people and keep the liberated from becoming oppressors themselves. So it gives us the moral framework by which not only to help people get free, but as Dr. King put it, to liberate the people who put us in bondage as well. And so I think that it's not just preaching theological propositions, but it's translating the truth of God's word into practical principles that shape policy. We have people here today who are policy makers. The reason the policy is broken is because the policy makers are broken. The reason policy is messed up is because people are messed up. But if we would as a church proclaim the moral gospel that actually not only liberates the soul, how Dr. Murdoch put it, he said that the gospel liberates us not only from the slavery of sin, but from the sin of slavery. If we can, in a real sense, help our policymakers as well to view oppressed people as folk who need to be set free, then I think our policy will get better.
Academic space. We got a new breed, a new flock of young theologues that are coming along. How is that space?
What's up, Cam? celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And I think it's important that, again, as you just said, that we move beyond simply theologizing in these silos, right? The seminary is the place where pastors, preachers, ministers, people with curiosity come to be prepared to engage, hopefully, in the work of social justice. Reverend, I was the teaching assistant and teaching associate for Archbishop Desmond Tutu when he was a visiting professor at Emory University. And it was just wonderful to be connected to him. We used to call him the Arch. The Arch was in the house. And he said, Aisha, get it.
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm like, wow, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was praying for me.
No.
But it was important to have someone
I'm built different, no.
to help us to understand we're not just going to pastor at church.
We celebrating him.
He was there to help us to understand that we are to be responsive to social ills of our day and not just in a silo, but to understand systemically how we're all connected in our responses to social justice. Decades later now, as I serve as the president of the seminary, what we've centered is what we call situated learning. And what that means is, as you come to seminary, you sit in the classroom, you understand that we're learning about a Jesus that might be different from the one you were taught in your church, that Jesus was a socio-political revolutionary who changed his communities. But you also can't do that disconnected from the community, from the people that you see every day. And so we want the seminary to be a place where people come in to learn, but where they also stay connected with their communities and walk alongside everyday people to affect and impact change in our everyday lives.
Thank you for that.
Reverend Jesse Jackson. That's Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Many congregations, I'm sorry, Pastor Shaw, yes, sir.
I wanted to add something to that because it just sparked something in my mind. And I think we have to become comfortable understanding that Jesus is not this blue-eyed, white, blonde-haired peacemaker that just walked around kissing babies and blessing everybody. Jesus was a rebel. Jesus was an instigator. Jesus flipped over stuff. Jesus got in trouble, and Jesus was not crucified just because he came to free us from our sins. He was crucified because of sin. He was crucified because the empire went against him because he was challenging the policies of the empire. And I think that we have Jesus jacked up. And black folk that have allowed this white evangelical mindset to creep into our church have also allowed them to rob us of Jesus. Because I watched the whole night of the election when they won, white people gathered in the lobby singing how great thou art. And it was just a tense moment for me because I'm saying, what kind of God do y'all serve? Because the God I serve cares about the poor, the disenfranchised, children, mothers that don't have resources for their babies. And I think when we get back to lifting the real Jesus and not that comfortable, safe, sanitized Jesus, then the church will shape this nation in a way nobody will be able to ignore.
Let me have that in pause. It's a amazing conversation to let whoever know there's a drive with you with Highlander. It has DJ. On the wall. So I want you to go and do that video right now. Well, Pastor Shaw, you didn't kick it off because what I just essentially heard you say is that we have to decolonize and deconstruct this image of Jesus that's been painted to us. Understood. Got you, sir. Keep it loud and clear. Well, since you opened that door, let me go ahead and go here. Black people in church like to pray. White people that call themselves Christians like to plan. Let me say it again. While we're busy pushing people to pray, they planning and putting policy together, strategizing and structuring, playing the long game for 50 years down the road, and we shall be foaming at the mouth, rolling around on the floor. I can't cuss, and not getting stuff done. So Pastor Beth, while white church often uses its collective numbers to gain political influence, the black church has struggled to translate its significant moral authority and community presence into tangible leverage? How do you suggest the Black church mobilizes congregants, not just spiritually, but politically and economically, to extract real change from communities? Y'all do it well. Teach us your ways.
All right, I'm gonna give that my best attempt here, but I first want to say there isn't anywhere I'd rather be this morning here with all of you. So thank you. We're facing a time, a real time, so we need to be together. So that's why it's great to be together today. So I just want to say, first of all, that it isn't as easy as Black church, white church, and we all know that because there are a lot of white churches that are not mobilizing, that are sitting around on their hands, and a lot of them are the white churches that know what's being done by white churches nationally to get an agenda that is absolutely antithesis to what Jesus stood for, and they are not speaking up or doing a thing about it. So I think the churches that are not doing a thing about it, we're all in the same boat, black, white, brown, everybody together. We're all in the same boat, and I think, before you think I'm super courageous, I just gotta say, I am not serving a local congregation. People that come to my church know what we stand for, and they know they better be ready and bumble in every Sunday. And so I don't get any Republicans right now coming to my church. I don't get any white Christian nationalists coming to my church. I wish I did in some ways. So I am not preaching to a mixed crowd, is what I'm saying. But I am very clear that we have got to stand up and be sane in our leadership. And let me tell you what sanity, one definition of sanity is that we are honest about what is real. That we are not afraid to look at reality as it is. You know how we always want to twist reality. And I grew up in an alcoholic family, and I can tell you what, my commitment to sanity and reality goes deep. Way beyond my faith. It goes deep. And so I think what we all need is this commitment to sanity. That first and foremost, we are willing to look at reality as it is. And then once we see it, once we are able to acknowledge it and not try to dance all around it, we have got to speak, we say all the time, speak truth to power. We have got to speak truth to power. And part of that, what that means for me as a white faith leader is I am 100% committed to using the terms white supremacy and Christian supremacy in all of my speaking of truth. Because when I start to say, oh, I shouldn't say white supremacy, or I shouldn't say Christian supremacy, and that's something we all have to deal with, Christian supremacy, because we are seeing it at the national level. We need to understand what it is, and we need to know how to speak into it. Because Jesus was not about Christian supremacy. Jesus was about living a life of justice and love together. And that means no supremacy of any kind stands firm. That means we stand for every supremacy. And that is not an easy task. And I don't have the answers. What I have is
faith.
This is a moment. Here's what I think. This is a moment when at the end of every day, we gotta look in the mirror and we're gonna have to ask ourselves a question. Did I show up today in the ways that Jesus would have shown up today? Whatever I did in my life today, did I show up in the ways that Jesus would have shown up? And we have to answer that question, and we are accountable to ourselves, we are accountable to our communities, we are accountable to our God, and we have to be able to say, I showed up. I showed up with skin on. To Dr. Gates' thing, we have got to be Jesus in the flesh in all ways. And that means speaking the hard things. I start my worship every week in my walk by saying, how we live together is more important than what we believe, because if believing doesn't manifest in doing, it means very little. And that's true for all of us.
Thank you so much for that response. I think in the spirit of truth telling, we also need to be very clear and be honest about the fact that when we look at the white Christian nationalist agenda, it's also an agenda that is about the control of women's bodies in spaces in a particular way. So we can't do this thing where we put racism over here, we put sexism over here, we put classism over here. From our own women's perspective, there's an intersectionality that we have to lean into and be honest about. And in the churches, patriarchy runs rampant.
Happy Martin Luther King
And we
weekend.
want to get caught up in the whole social justice conversation and not talk about justice for women and not talk about how poverty impacts women and children specifically, and how this new agenda and these folks coming in want to control specifically reproductive rights of women, because they see the long game and they see where this thing is going, and they want to protect whiteness and white supremacy. So a part of our work at the church is helping congregations to deconstruct whiteness, because whiteness is a falsehood and supremacy is a lie. And so, the ways in which we preach and teach have to do that. But I also understand that we're understanding that we need to step up and stand up for our sisters.
Yes. Come on, somebody got to do it. Woo!
I think in some ways this moment we're about to live into may provide us new occasions and opportunities to go back to texts in the Scripture that no matter how people voted, they're accountable to. So your comment about patriarchy is so critical. Let me throw a text out. The Galatians text, which we know so well. In Christ, there is no bond or free, Jew or Gentile, male or female. That text, I learned, was read at every baptism in the early church. It was a baptismal formula, as if they were saying, now, this movement that we're part of, that we're baptizing this disciple into, is committed as a vocation to try and overcome these intersected realities of race, class, and gender. They're all three there, all the time, and from the beginning, the early Christians said, we're in the business of overcoming and transforming those agendas. And if you don't want to do that, you should go somewhere else, because we're not the group for you. Then I learned that in Fisk University, where they have all the slaveholder Bibles, that Galatians 3:28 text was removed from every slaveholder Bible. It was called the abolitionist movement, the abolitionist text, because all those three, class, race, and gender, are always there. And the followers of Jesus at the beginning said, we're in the midst of overcoming they're the pillars of oppression and division. So the slaveholder Bibles took it out because they didn't want to deal with it. So what are the texts that these people are leaving out that we can put back in very publicly and forcefully?
Dr. Wallace, thank you, Dr. Andy. I want to...
And she can have that conversation after the forum. They trying to talk through the
And
forum.
I'm a fierce, ardent defender of the faith. What I mean by that is, I'm not sure that American Christianity, historically as we know it, is rooted in Christianity. It has been more American than anything else. I do think there are things we've got right, don't get me wrong. But I think, by and large, I was in Vancouver when I was listening to Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr. Say that the only thing wrong with white Christianity is its whiteness. And here is the challenge that I want to listening to text, if the way that you read the Bible never makes you uncomfortable, you're not reading it right. The scriptures cut everybody, even everybody on this platform. And the danger is we can so read everybody else's wrong that we never see our wrong. We'll use the word you wanted to use, but you can't because you're on this platform. We never see our wrong in the scripture. And I think the most powerful prophetic witness of scripture is not to read it simply as a window, but to read it also as a mirror. So that the God of the Bible confronts your injustice, that you feel like you're bleeding after you read it. And I sense that in America, and regardless of what our stances are, we do not always preach TV in that lane, where when we're done preaching, everybody goes, ouch, and not even all this out. You preach risky sermons, you take a risk, and there's a mental component to dealing with this trauma at these various intersections. If you all could speak to how you have been able to keep your mind while leading people through the valleys of shadow and death.
Oh, that's
we preach about even getting to heaven while we drive through hell to get to our churches to preach those sermons. So how are you handling this work from the mental perspective?
I can say something about that. I would say you, Stephen, are part of how I keep my mental health. I am part of and connected to incredible faith leaders across the city who inspire me, who continue to motivate me, who care for me, and who keep it real. And I think that is, for most pastors, there's a term in organizational leadership that Margaret Wheatley came up with called islands of sanity. Islands of sanity. And the faith leaders that I do my organizing with, the community leaders, they are my islands of sanity. And without those islands of sanity, I don't know that I would be able to continue, honestly. I can do what I'm doing because you're doing what you're doing, and I know you and I care about you. And the same, it goes both ways. And I think, again, we are headed into this time where if you do not have networks like that, previously, you got to have those networks. And you have got to be doing justice and love work with people who you know are as committed as you are and who are going to tell you the truth when you need to hear the truth. And again, I think, there might be days when my mental health is a little, so or whatever, I'm tired, whatever it is. But as soon as I see you in person and we have 5 minutes together, I'm good to go again. And it's true with people all over the city of Chicago that I do these different parts of the work with. Reverend, I can see Reverend for 5 minutes and I'm good to go. Dr. Wilson, I can see her for 5 minutes and I'm good to go. Because we know we're in it together and we're doing it and we can support each other.
Thank you for that, Reverend. That's rich. I would just add, for some people, I'm too liberal. I'm too risky. I go viral at least 3 times a year for something I've said risky and edgy and prophetic. So I'm too liberal. You're a heretic on one side. And then for those who are liberal and progressive, I'm too conservative and I'm not edgy enough on the other side. So at some point, you have to understand, like Dr. Robert said once, you have revolutionists and you have evolutionists. John the Baptist was a revolutionist. He's outside pushing against empire. Jesus was an evolutionist who was able to get in the system and touch people through being inside the temple. And you have to be comfortable about what you're called to do and who you're called to be, because you'll never be enough for somebody. You'll never
Amen, I
for
say.
somebody.
Amen.
You can walk on water and say, why didn't you run? You can touch the moon and walk fix everything that we're dealing with all this post-traumatic slave disorder, with all this anxiety and bipolar and depression and trauma we see on the news. You have to find a place to protect your mental health. And for me, it has been therapy. I got Christ and a counselor in Jesus' name.
Because as you said, your people energize you. Because it can be lonely. Nobody's ever pleased with you. What you said, we said about Archbishop Desmond. The black students felt like he wasn't radical enough, and the white students felt like he was too radical. And he couldn't please any of us, even as we were all learning what was actually going on in South Africa for the first time in our arrogance, right? But I think Dr. Shamika Walker-Barnes wrote a book called Sacred Self-Care. And I'm not just an academician, I'm also a pastor. I've been pastoring the Christ Community Church of Things for 11 years. I grew up in Chicago, on Jeffrey Manor on the South Side.
Woo!
And I just moved back to Chicago the day before yesterday, y'all.
Woo!
A little tired, but I'm glad to be back home. After 13 years. But we had our entire congregation read that book. And walk through daily practices for self-care. Sometimes, we go, we feel like we need to go. A part of the trappings of America is this whole notion of grind culture. We gotta be grinding all the time. Like we've been grinding for 400 years as a people. You need to learn how to say no. No is a whole sentence. You need to feel comfortable with saying, I can't do that right now. I need to get some rest. I need to take a mental health day. Everybody can't get to a therapist. And so at our church, we have a spiritual care team that's a part of the church that's available. Some of them are licensed clinical therapists. And we made those mental resources available not just to me, but to the entire congregation.
Yeah, she said Jeffrey Manor. So no.
So our church, the Progressive Baptist Church,
South side, not east side.
Justice is in the neighborhood at 39th and Wells. People can walk to it. We wholeheartedly believe it and I practice it, hands down. Jesus says, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart. You will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Our Christ knows that life will weary you. And I think we got to first accept the fact that life, as we know it, because it's affected by the fall, is not going to be a bed of roses. Just waking up in the morning and living life is going to involve some trouble. But Jesus also said that he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. When I read these scriptures, man, one of the things that I take away is that I live somewhere in between the right now and the not yet. I live between the already and the what's to come. And so I'm born in tension. This is a pilgrim's journey. And there are some things that the Lord doesn't intend for me to fix. He intends to use my voice at the time that I'm alive to do my part and then to go on. And I've got to be comfortable, even in the principle of Sabbath, and understanding I got limitations. And so since I got limitations, I go try to fix it up. That's Jesus' job. Go to bed at night and enjoy my family. Amen. Just to say, but you're also doing what Dr. King fought for, and that was access to housing. And so I wanted to be sure that we celebrated that. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what you're doing about housing in Roseland? Yes.
Wow.
Woo. Foundation in Salem is building 100 houses. We've got 11 of them in the ground.
Woo!
These are homes for first-time homeowners that have built-in equity. So we build them at the actual cost, but we sell them underneath that. So the first-time homeowners actually have $100,000 of equity once they move in. Thank you so much.
I think it's going to be, I'm already finding further digging up in the mornings since the election. And hear the media talk about the most powerful man in the world every day. that we should start our days with some kind of devotion, silence, prayer, mindfulness before we read or hear the news. That we often, too many of us, get up and hit the news, but the news hits us. And the Arabs realize he and the Dalai Lama in the wonderful book called Joy, where it's about their conversations, they both got up so early to prepare food for the day, and it wasn't hitting all the cable networks. So whatever it is, and maybe it's, instead of our saying just who Jesus was and throwing his name out, his name got thrown out in a hearing last week over a cabinet secretary, throwing out a name when the cabinet nominee couldn't answer the question. But what would it mean if every morning we got up and we went back to Jesus? What did he say? What did it mean? What does that mean for us today? And one parable that I'm going back to again and again, that King talked about in his sermon, The Jericho Road, was the Good Samaritan parable. This lawyer comes to Jesus to test him. And I dug deeply into that text, and I realized it was a Washington lawyer. Because I recognized that tone of voice. What do I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus? Well, I think you know. You love God, like heart, soul, mind, strength, your neighbor yourself. He says, who is my neighbor? Not like, who is my neighbor? How could I welcome them? But like, who am I obligated to? Jesus, well, I give an example. This Samaritan. Now, in Judean culture, which Jesus was addressing, there were no good Samaritans. They were regarded as mixed race, half-breeds, dangerous, false worshipers. They were othered. They were othered by their society. Back then, the rumors were like Samaritans and cartels coming from Mexico. Oh, no, that's a different group. But they're othered like that. And the Samaritan, who was Jesus' example of being a good neighbor, is someone who's othered by those around him. Even the man by the side of the road, Jewish scholars tell us, was Jewish. So here's a Samaritan helping somebody who's othered him, that he's othered to. It takes time, energy, risk, money, changes his schedule to help that man by the side of the road. So the Good Samaritan undermines all ideas of othering or any idea of us and them, and tries to say, your neighbor probably doesn't live in some neighborhood, different neighborhood. So that kind of reflection on Jesus, I'm going to need more and more and more of before I start my day with the news.
Thank you. Can we celebrate some amazing God, the privilege, the sacrifice that they did? And now we want to hear from our congressman to bring us insight and inspiration, Congressman Jonathan Jackson.
One note, Reverend Jesse Jackson's son, one of his sons, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Neighbor, so glad to see you today. So glad to see you today. So glad to see y'all today. So glad to see you today.
Thank you so much. We're going to continue our program.
Yo.
And I'd just like to share with you a few thoughts that I have about our founder and on this King Day. And let's give our wonderful panelists a great theologian.
Jesse Jackson right there.
Commemoration that we have for the Reverend Martin Luther King. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my mother and my father, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Woo!
For 50 years strong.
Woo! Reverend Jesse Jackson right there.
More enough, this building big enough that we can all sit in here and commemorate the life of the Reverend Martin Luther King.
Woo!
I tell you, I specifically say Reverend Martin Luther King because the world wants to call him simply Dr. Martin Luther King. But you become a doctor when you have a thesis and you write a paper, and that's your idea. But you become a reverend when you have a calling from God. That's the goal of the call. So even in salutation in your writing, you put reverend above the doctor.
What
You
happened
don't
to his
stand when
son?
the politician comes in the room. You
The
stand
other
when
son
the
got
minister
passed, man.
comes in the room. Let us always remember that this may be a celebration of a birthday for some to see Dr. Martin Luther King, but this is a moment of commemoration for the Reverend Martin Luther King that did not give his life. His life was taken. He was slain. He had been assassinated. I want to thank the CEO of McDonald's, my brother and friend, Brother Joe Erlinger, who's here with us today, who has stood by his commitment to expand diversity, equity, and inclusion in the community. Give our brother Joe a loving round of applause. Stand for a second, Joe. Raise your hand.
Woo!
One thing I would like for you to take away on this day is what would Reverend Martin Luther King be doing? My father, Reverend Jackson, was planted in this building, in this city, if you will, by Reverend Martin Luther King. My father was like a very young seminarian. He did not have the support of his father and his family, the maternal, paternal. They didn't quite understand what his mission was. He was married to my wife. They were young parents without all the resources that they needed, but they were believers. They came to this cold city from South Carolina, from Virginia, seeking opportunity to build a family. They went to the University of Chicago. They got into the seminary. They weren't looking for the wealth of the world. They were looking to make a difference. And with 3 children, my father saw Reverend Martin Luther King again, and he said, Jesse, I want you to join the movement. I've seen you in North Carolina, and I've seen you around. And my father said, but I'm here on a scholarship at the University of Chicago in seminary. I've got 3 babies. I need the student housing. Reverend Martin Luther King, knowing his time was short, he said, Jesse, I can teach you more about the seminary in 6 months than you can learn over there in 3 years. Come and join. And my father never looked back.
I don't know if I'm letting my phone battery die though. It's on 10%.
When they lost their housing from the University of Chicago, there was a migration of people leaving the South Side because the inner city urban environment was getting too black, too poor. This building became available, a former synagogue, with an idea to get ministers to come together and sponsor this program. We wanted to have a program on Saturday at 10 a.m. that would complement churches at Sunday at 10 a.m. to keep the Montgomery movement and association alive, to keep the SCLC moving remember my father telling me, Jonathan, now is the time that we start massive resistance. Now is the time that we fight back. So let me tell you, I've not been depressed one day.
I just got off work at 8 o'clock
If
this
you
morning.
feel tired, you feel depressed, I should send you a picture of me because I'm ready to fight. And I'm telling you, it's in the bones. And I want your children to have that same energy, gusto, get up and fight. You're a child of God. And let me tell you what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. President Trump is concerned about 3 departments. He's concerned about the Treasury Department. He's going to try to remove Powell and all those in the Treasury so they can lift the debt ceiling so he can raise money as he wants while cutting taxes. So he's concerned about the Treasury Department. He's concerned about the intelligence community. That's why he just took out a very capable and very loyal servant of the American people, Representative Turner, who was 90% with Trump, but he didn't think that was good enough. He wants somebody 100% with Trump. The same way he wanted K.O.E. at the FBI to tell him, will you do everything I ask and need your loyalty is what he asked Mr. K.O.E. of the FBI. He said, I'll honor the Constitution, I'll follow the law. Mr. Trump said, that's not enough, I need you to resign. So he's going to try to replace those persons. He wants the Treasury, he wants the Justice Department, and he wants the intel community. You're going to hear this theme over and over again. I want you to know, in this year of our Lord, 2025, follow me, is 60 years after the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Those persons that were against Reverend Martin Luther King in life are the same people and their great-grandchildren that are against Reverend Martin Luther King in his death. They've not stopped fighting. I need you to get your children and talk to your grandparents and talk to the other children. The fight is on. Somehow or another, we've stopped taking our medicine too soon. When we stand up for DEI programs, this is the chemotherapy, if you will, to the body politic of sexism and racism. Don't stop taking the chemo treatment too soon. And as much as they think African American and women need DEI programs, the truth of the matter is white America, corporate America needs it even more. Somebody said that's a glad you asked. What do you mean they need it more than we do? If you don't have programs that intentionally get rid of discrimination and racism, then that becomes the norm. We're overcoming 300 years of segregation, lynching, oppression, racism, and slavery. 56 years after Reverend Martin Luther King's death, it's not been erased. That is how you can have DEI. You're talking about a person
sad. Me too.
To commemorate the life of Reverend Martin Luther King. Let us be emboldened. Let us feel empowered. And here's going to be the end game and conclusion of what's going to happen with Donald J. Trump. This is going to be like a play of Macbeth. You're going to see the rich and powerful all come together. He's got more billionaires in his cabinet than we've ever seen in American history. From all the private equity firms, and for all the union members that didn't want to stand with Vice President Harris, I ask you, where's your union representation in the cabinet today? To Mr. Elon Musk, the world's wealthiest man and other billionaires, ladies and gentlemen, don't be impressed with wealth. First of all, someone told me once, don't be impressed with wealth because you can look and see who the good Lord gives it to. He's not impressed. They want to talk about all of these H-1B visa programs, and they want to talk about rounding up the immigrants on day one. Mr. Elon Musk, didn't you overstay your H-1B visa? You're against affirmative action and you're in support of the H-1 visa program and you're against anchor babies. Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy, didn't you come from a caste community in India that had affirmative action and that's how your parents came over here? Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy, the man that wants to be this mascot in public and he's going to be a plaything for them before they excuse him to the back of the line. Aren't you the same person that Ed Cutler said, I like your issues, you stand for the things that I believe, but I cannot support you, Mr. Ramaswamy, because you're Indian? That's what she said. Mr. Ramaswamy, you said you're anti-affirmative action and you're anti-anchor babies. Your father is not a citizen, your mother was not a citizen at the time that you were born. Although you think she was on the path to becoming a citizen, aren't you an anchor baby in the United States of America?
My phone gonna die. Peace, y'all. Rewatch the live, like it, comment. Keep hope alive.
We're going to show resistance. We're going to show our support for corporations.
Happy New Year, too. Happy New Year. Happy 2025, or whatever it is.
We're not going to let a young man named Robbie Starbuck in Tennessee, who was a video producer in California, ran for the 5th Congressional District in Tennessee, failed at everything in life, then he started bashing corporations' commitment to DEI. Then he's got 7-8 million Twitter followers. He's sending out tweets to corporate America, telling them they have to renege on their DEI commitments. No. It ain't going down like that. We're going to show up at the boardrooms and at the shareholder meetings to make corporations do what they said they're going to do. We're going to make sure that corporations can do what's in their shareholders' best interest, to align their consumers, to align their boards, to align their interests with the communities that they serve.
Y'all welcome. Peace out.
We got
I'm ending it.
We're